4 risks created by real estate agents in California, probably for the whole country, but I'm an attorney and broker licensed in California. Real estate agents, their process and their forms are creating 4 easily defined and easily seen risks for home sellers when they're helping the seller sell a home and there's a buyer agent involved. So this is what happens. A seller now contacts a listing agent. The listing agent goes out to the seller's property. They talk about selling the home and they state, I'm going to get paid 2.5% or 3% or whatever they charge for selling a home. They may or may not talk about buyer agent compensation, but when they do, they have to be very careful because they may be breaking the law. They just got sued for $1.6 billion. They don't have any forms. They have no authority to talk about this. They're not attorneys, and they may get in trouble. We've had other videos about that. That's not what we're worried about now. I'm now talking about what happens. Seller lists. It's great. We're going to sell my home. Hopefully I'll sell it for this much. Things are great. No problem. Realtors doing what realtors can do. They put it up on the MLS. Maybe they field calls. They set up showings. And that's where it ends, though. Afterwards, most likely, a buyer's agent is going to show the property. The buyer's agent is saying they've already got a contract with the buyer saying, if I show a property and you make an offer, I'm going to get paid 2.5%, 3%, whatever they agree to. But I can tell you they're being trained. You can see the training on the net to go for the max. They're like, if you got to put it in writing, you might as well go for the max and then say, but don't worry. I know you don't want to pay $30,000 on $1 million home because you'd rather use that for a deposit or to fix it up, put in new floors, new appliances. But don't worry, I'll get the seller to pay for it. So in essence, what they got in trouble before, it's not really your money, it's the seller's. Like that's already a problem, as if the seller will pay for it because it's really the buyer's money. That's what got them sued in the first place. And that's the first risk, right? You're going to have to make sure that that seller understands that you're paying their agent as a convenience. That money's fungible. I was an econ major before a lawyer. I understand it. But in the class action suits, the lawyers and the buyer's position is if I didn't know I was paying my own agent, I thought the seller was paying for it, whether they were told that by the buyer's agent, which is implicitly what's still going on, whether because in the process they get a checkbox and they ask the seller to pay for it. It's not necessarily obvious to the buyer that it's their money. So the first risk is really that the buyer thinks that the seller is paying for their buyer agent costs. And that's also part of the second risk here. When you have a third party paying for your agent's costs, there's inherent conflicts there. Will that all rise to a lawsuit? I don't know, but lawyers, we have can you imagine that you're the plaintiff's lawyer and you're getting paid by, you're suing a car company because cars exploded. You're getting paid by the car company that you're suing to represent the plaintiff. I mean, you'd have to have a lot of paperwork at the very least. But now let me just bring it back out. So the offer comes in, the box is checked, and now the listing agent is doing what? Like, I don't even understand what a listing agent does. Oh, don't worry. We're not going to counter that 2.5% or 3%, even though you could maybe counter it to 1%. There might be times you could counter it to 0%. Don't worry. We'll just work on the price of the home. Like they're already saying that. I mean, I don't even know what a listing agent's doing because frankly, I'd be advising the seller, let's bifurcate the process so we know what's going on. We can start off agreeing to the 3%, but let's say if you would like to get 3%, put it on this form. In the meantime, on this form, we're going to negotiate price and closing dates and things like that. So now you've bifurcated the process. You can negotiate buyer agent compensation separately from the price of the home because there's different issues driving the buyer agent compensation. So so first off, a listing agent is not even properly counseling their seller when they're acting like they're competent to sell the home because they're incompetent to properly respond to the request to begin with. Secondly, they should be saying, by the way, if you agree to pay this, like you could do 0 and that would be safe. But if you agree to pay this, you have risks of compromising the fiduciary duty of the buyer's agent because you have to at least make them aware that when their agent's getting paid a percentage, their agent is being incentivized to have them pay more. Like, I think you could still do that without getting sued, but you'd have to put something in your counteroffer that educates the buyer and says, we're waiving our right to sue you on this issue because really you shouldn't be offering. The DOJ said that buyers would be happy to know that their agents aren't being incentivized to have them pay more. So this is something that could pretty easily be mitigated to a large extent, if not completely, if the agent was if your listing agent was a lawyer. But without it, like, how are they even doing that? So that's a breach of their fiduciary duty. They're not explaining their incompetence, and they're not protecting you. I'm going to have to go pretty soon, so I'm going to wrap this up pretty fast. Secondly, there's commission fixing and price fixing involved here. I just explained earlier, the buyer's agent's going in and asking for the max. If an agent was paying, if a buyer was paying out of their pocket, it'd be what they pay attorneys to review the thing when they buy the contract, when they buy directly from the listing agent. In my experience, that's $10,000 or less, more like $3,000 to $5,000, depending what the attorney's doing. So, maybe a little bit more for carting them around, maybe up to $10,000. It would very rarely be $30,000. So prices in this form, in the way realtors are doing, are already escalating. So you're going to have to educate if you're going to pay 3%, again, you need some waivers and some education of the buyers if you're going to do it. And then finally, steering. This deserves its own video, but I'm just going to say that steering is built into this process. Because when you get an offer, and let's say it's after a few rounds, it's for the price you want to sell for, why would you still pay the buyer's agent? Why wouldn't you just say, I accept your price, I'm paying $0 for your buyer's agent? It's implicitly, if your agent doesn't tell you, it's implicit, because the buyer will walk, because they're already tied up with the buyer's agent. So right now in this process, you're being steered to the homes where they're paying big buyer agent fees. They're going to be steered away from homes that they're not. Again, something a lawyer can help you help you mitigate. Now, can this all be done with forms? I don't know. I don't think it would be proper, because as a seller, you're going to have different levels of risk-averse sellers, and you're going to have different processes, and you can mitigate the risk from 100% by doing some things down to pretty good with some forms and some training. I don't think that could ever be done with just forms. So that is why I say every time a listing agent allows the seller to pay buyer agent compensation in California, if they're not attorney, they haven't counseled their clients, they're either breaching their fiduciary duty or they're practicing law without a license. And I haven't even gotten into what a counteroffer should really look like, and the language there, and the incompetence of an agent to actually counsel their seller into doing it properly with the right words and the right mitigation. So we've got lots of problems created by realtors. They can be fixed, but they can only be fixed, in my opinion, in California, when you either have an attorney working with a realtor or you have a listing attorney broker helping the seller. All very good options. Learn more at listingattorney.com. Thank you.